Hi all, and welcome back to another one of my voiceover slash slideshow slash video productions. I'm sure you'll understand, filming in the dealer environment is a bit restrictive, so I must be careful what is shown in the videos. So while I prepare the other parts for the high performance package for the Mazda Protege, I decided to chime in and give the SAAB fans an update on the 900 and show what the hell happened inside this 2.1 liter block. Although we pretty much got an idea. There were a couple of hairy moments when disassembling this 30-year-old engine. You know, there were a few bolts that sheared off and just left me freaking petrified in fear. One was in the cylinder head, as shown here by the red circle, and the other one was in the end plate for the water pump. That was the one I was really worried about. I was able to extract the one on the head, but the one in the end plate, I didn't get so lucky. I wound up having to drill it out, and I was literally sweating bullets the whole time. But I was able to successfully drill out the bolt. I drilled perfectly through the center of the bolt, removed it, and ran thread taps into the hole and repaired the threads. So that means sometime in the past, it had been apart and it was cross-threaded. So to help with the repair, I got lucky and recently found a 1988 SAAB 900 SPG in the salvage yard. I went in there and I got a few parts off it that I had been searching for a very long time. And I got all the bolts for the valve cover, and I used them as intake bolts and bolts for the water pump outlet flanges. These bolts are all the same, so if this happens to you and you see a 900 in a junkyard, get the bolts from the valve cover instead of going through the process of a mass disassembly just to get 3 bolts for the water pump and the water pump outlet flanges for the end plates. These bolts are all the same. So from this stage of the disassembly, I was close to removing the cylinder head. Once I got it off, I went ahead and started with separating the block from the gearbox. Now this is quite a bit of work, and it was a very, very nasty job. There was oil everywhere. This left the gearbox sitting all by itself, as you can see, and if you look at that, that is what 30 years of oil accumulation looks like. Looking at this greasy gearbox and oil parts, I knew I had some long days ahead of me of getting all this cleaned up and prepped for reassembly, but it has to be done, you know, in order to get the car running again. So yeah, that's a lot of stuff that needs to be cleaned up. You wouldn't see the inside from this view of the oil sump, but it was full of metal glitter from the failed bearing. I wish I should have taken a picture of that to show you guys, but I didn't. So after removing the end plates and the oil pickup tube from the block, I took the block and placed it up on the hydraulic table for further disassembly and examination of the failed components. You can see in this image the block plate for the add-on heater is removed to get all the coolant out of the engine. Now it is said to never remove these because the gaskets are very difficult to find, but that's where modern classic SAAB comes to the rescue. There's a replacement plate that they make, Jordan Pagano he makes, and with a rubber gasket, and it's made available for purchase, and this solves that issue. And of course you'll see it featured on the block upon reassembly. So here you can see an assortment of bolts, fasteners, and timing gears from the 900 engine. I did my best to keep these organized so I'll know what goes where later. Here are the timing components of the engine. These are the rails, and all this stuff was really done for. The chain was stretched, and there was a piece of the rail that came off, and felt like plastic crumbs. So on this B212, of course I was wrong about it being cylinder number 3. As I mentioned when I was in the parking lot, I thought probably it was cylinder number 3. It was actually cylinder number 1, and this time, which I found to be kind of strange. Nevertheless, it failed. Just listen at that knock. So I started with removing the big end rod caps so I could get the pistons out. And of course, since these had been in place for such a long time, it was necessary to tap on the rods with a hammer to get them to separate. Once I got the bearing out, you can see that it is showing signs of wear. Now, I don't know if this is cylinder 2 or 3. I believe cylinder 2 and 3. The wear on this bearing is definitely there showing, and it was on its way out just as well. You can see the copper color on the inside of this bearing. Next came the crankshaft, and even if you take a look at the main bearings, they were showing additional signs of wear, so I guess this was to be expected. The engine did have 276,000 miles on it, but by SAAB standards, this should have been a cakewalk. So it's apparent that at some point this engine had been starved of oil or suffered from lack of oil changes, but to be starved of oil several times and still go the distance of 276,000 miles is a real testament to the build quality and toughness of SAAB engines. Try that with one of these newer engines built these days, and I don't think you'll get so lucky. Here you can see the damage to the crankshaft journal of cylinder number 1. Also note the copper colors on the other crank journals or crank pins, which, as before mentioned, shows that the other bearings, including the mains, were done for. Look at these pistons. Now this doesn't surprise me at all. I've seen a couple of SAAB engines that were disassembled before, and with way more than 300,000 miles on the clock, and these pistons have always seemed to be clean in these engines. This could possibly be that they had very little blow-by to the excellent sealing of the rings, and yes, there's some scrubbing on the skirt there on the piston, but overall it looks to be in very good shape. Very reusable stuff, so nothing going on there that can't be reused. Here is the mangled number 1 rod bearing. You can see that shape-wise it is no longer normal. Is no longer a normal half shell, but it looks like it was melted at some point. It had to have gotten very hot and was deformed due to the rotational forces and excessive heat. I gotta admit, now, the day it went, I really had my foot into this car. The red line is a very low 6,000 RPM for the 2.1 liter, but I was rolling along at about 5,500 RPM at 120 miles an hour in 4th gear when this happened. So the connecting rod had been heat soaked and damaged. I even had trouble getting the big end of it apart. Here are some images of the other bearings that were retrieved from the engine. So to fix this issue, I knew right away that I would need to get another connecting rod. So I went on eBay and purchased this piston rod combo from a well-known seller of SAAB parts, and believe it or not, it was only about 55 bucks for this. The combo actually came from a SAAB B212 turbo engine. Now I did need the piston, but I did need the connecting rod from it, as the B212 shares the same connecting rods with the B212 engine, or the B212i. The connector rod next to it is from the blown Protege engine. Now the reason I did that is to show you guys just how beefy SAAB connecting rods are in comparison to other vehicles. It shed some light on why SAAB engines were so robust and tough, and why their engines could withstand a lot of abuse. It also reveals the answer to a question that I saw on one of the SAAB forums. I'll reveal this question later on. It is sort of performance related, but more on that later. Here is the rod all by itself after a thorough cleaning. I also knew I would have to replace the crankshaft. This kind of had me on edge because I knew there would be great difficulty in finding something suitable. A couple of weeks later, I stumbled across a web page called 1000's Engine Parts. They are located in Greece. I was able to secure a used crankshaft that uses standard bearings for a really good price. weeks later, and it was being delivered to me. Once I got it to the shop, I started with the cleaning process in the solvent tank, and I used small diameter brushes to clean out the drilled oil galleys, and finally I put a pass over it with some Arrow Magnolia solution to help brighten up the metal. Once cleaned, I started to measure the crank journals and to ensure that it does indeed use standard size bearings. Turns out the crankshaft is within specs, so everything's all good. So here is the cleaned and prepped crankshaft after I hand polished the journals. Next, I needed to start cleaning the block. I got the block over to the parts washer and cleaned off all the dirt and oil. And at some point I honed the cylinders, washed it again, and cleaned out all the oil. Cleaned the oil galleys with mineral spirits, and then kind of blow dried everything out with some compressed air. Once all the solvent and mineral spirits were removed, I taped up the block, and I decided to throw on some high temp VHT engine paint. Now the color you see is a non-traditional for the SAAB'S, but I did this to make it easier to see oil leaks. When the engine's in the car, the block sits a bit low in the engine bay, and it can get dark towards the bottom or lower portion of the engine bay. This makes oil leaks very difficult to find. Also, I just prefer the aluminum over the red. The paint came out looking pretty smooth. It was a lot smoother than expected, really. And, I wasn't even trying to make it look like this, but, it happened. Finally, here are the pistons and rods after a thorough cleanse in the solvent tank and a bath in Arrow Magnolia. I swear this stuff, it works really good to clean off oil, dirt, and grime off of just about any metal. It's not just for aluminum. These pistons weren't that dirty to begin with, so cleaning them wasn't that big of a deal. These will get new rings to help seal the fresh home cylinder surfaces. The cylinder head was normal, so I won't be showing it, but I did take it over to the machine shop and have a valve job and resurface treatment following a B blast cleanse. So this is just a refresh for the B212 engine, as in the future it will be disassembled again with a complete blueprinting, and we'll get some forged hardware for a high compression turbo build. This was a lot of work, so I'll have to split this into a second video in which I clean the gearbox and reseal some of its oil leaks. And of course prep the engine block and cylinder head for reassembly. So I'll be doing a little bit more video on that, and yeah, so thank you for watching. Don't forget to click the like and sub buttons, and I will see you in the next video. Take care.